Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old master bather, Scott Bradfield, and this is the old master bather's parakeet, Dodo. And I didn't really want to bring Dodo down here, but she just decided to show up. And I might try to put her away. Why don't you go back up to your little daily bop? Go on. You want to go up there? There you go. Go ahead. Um, I may have to tape this again, but she has a thing. She goes into her. Yes, this is the thing. She's obsessed with jumping on my head. This is not. This is. It's not really funny. It's funny. My wife thinks it's funny, but I don't find it funny. Dodo, you're gonna have to go back in the cage. Anyway, this is the old masturbator, Scott Bradfield. We're masturbating much more than we normally do in this episode, and Dodo's very loud. I don't want to make her leave, but I think she'll settle down. We're talking. I'm going to do a very brief talk anyway, so I'm not going to let this. I'm not going to let Dodo bother me. She's trying to distract me. I know it. We're going to talk. We're doing a kind of series, a new series of. They're a new theme show called Marvelously Wasteful, and I don't have any theme music for it except for the sound of this crazy bird. Here's my Manhattan. I need it now so I don't yell at Dodo. And need it now more than ever. Marvelously Wasteful is a theme show which is basically it's totally wasted time in the bathtub. But then I was thinking that's basically what we're trying to do anyway, right? So basically, if you're not really wasting your time in the bathtub with a book, then you're probably doing it wrong. But still, I thought that these certain types of books were really, really extra wasteful, and I couldn't think of too many reasons to read them, but I still enjoyed reading them anyway. So I reread some books I read as a kid. This is what old people do: is we go back and read these books that we read as kids. These kind of ruined me, by the way. There were two books by a woman named Eleanor Cameron. I don't know anything about her, and I don't think I've ever heard of anybody talk about Eleanor Cameron. But then I don't hear much going on anyway. One of her first children's books was called "The Wonderful Flight of the Mushroom Planet," and I think this is the first book I ever read of hers, and it was probably one of the first kind of science fiction books I read as a kid. It sort of ruined me for life, really. I could never read serious literature again and take it too seriously. And then the sequel, which I remember I think I remember this even more vividly, which is the Stowaway to the Mushroom Planet. And when did these come out? I want to say they came out in the 50s. This is the sequel, the second volume of the series was in 1956. Dodo, shut up. And the first one was published in 1954. Okay? And they were young adult books. They were children's books, not young adults. These are for children, really. And they were big hits. I didn't know this. I just went to the Wikipedia page to read about Eleanor Cameron. And I read them by accident. There's just sort of book I picked up at the school library. You know, the schools used to have good libraries full of junky books you could read. And I picked this up, and I sat in the library. I remember it was I was 5 or 6, 7 years old when I read this book. And it was just something magical about it. I don't know why. It's just those books you read. Dr. Dolittle books really knocked me out as a little kid. And then this book really knocked me out. And I don't know why so much. I mean, rereading them today is difficult. Not difficult. I take that back. Dodo's really distracting the hell out of me. They're not as much fun as you get older. You know, you don't get that magic. You want to read these books you read as a kid, and you think you're going to recover that, get that sort of magical feeling of reading them. They're still fun to read, and I did enjoy rereading them. But as a kid, they just sort of they imagine this kind of miraculous universe that was existing in your little suburban community. You know, I was living in San Luis Obispo, very similar, kind of boring little area with lots of, people going to jobs and living in kind of boring little houses. And in this volume, in both the volumes, there's these two boys, young boys, who are probably 6 or 7 or 8, and they meet this man named I think his name's Tycho Bass, and he moves into their area. They live in Pacific Grove. That's another thing I really liked about these books as a kid, is they were set in California, and they're set in Monterey in Pacific Grove. And they meet a guy, he's like a little kind of mushroom-looking guy, because he's from the Mushroom Planet. And he lives on Earth and creates inventions, and he doesn't know he doesn't know where he comes from. He just knows he's kind of an odd mushroom guy, and he lives in this house, and there's all these kind of amazing stuff in it. And these kids go over to visit him, and they become friends with him. He's like their local their local friend. They go over to his house. This is back when little kids could go to someone's house and people weren't afraid they were being molested or groomed or something. And they would go to this weird guy's house, and basically he says he's going to build a spaceship for them. They have to build a spaceship. If they build a spaceship, he can make sure it'll go to this. He wants to send them off to this planet that he's discovered with his super telescope and all this stuff. And he has created some magical paint that will make this thing go. So the kids go to the beach and they build this spaceship, and they tell their parents. That's the other thing that's kind of fun about these stories. They're not like secret. It's not the kids keeping secrets from their parents. The parents kind of know everything that's going on, and they say, "Oh yeah, go ahead, go play with Mr. Bass, and yeah, go ahead, build a spaceship and go to another planet. It's all right. We'll be here when you get back." And so these kids build a spaceship out of cardboard and old tin cans and stuff like that, sheet metal, and they give it to Mr. Bass, and he paints it and sends them off to the Mushroom Planet. And they meet some people, and there's some adventures along the way, and then they come back. And reading it again, there's not much happens in it. There's not any really kind of there's no evil characters in it, like in the Oz books where there's the evil witches and so forth, and there's bad people. There's almost no bad or evilness in either of the books that I reread. There's 5. I believe there's 5 of these books. So anyway, the kids come back, and then somebody reports that they saw Mr. Bass wandering around one day in a windy day, and he got blown away. It's a weird little image, just this little man being blown away by the wind, and he disappears at the end of this book. And you wait a couple of years later, I guess, and you read the Stowaway to the Mushroom Planet. I like the illustrations too. There's Mr. Bass. There you go. No, he has a cousin. I don't know if that's Tycho Bass or his cousin comes. Another mushroom person comes to live in Pacific Grove, and use all these inventions. And it's another sort of story. There's the stowaway sneaking onto the ship. And again, there's no evil in it. There's no monsters in it. They go back to the planet. The most evil person in it is some kind of not very good scientist who stows away on the spaceship so that he can go to this planet and come back and discover everything. And the kids take them to this planet, to the Mushroom Planet. They see all their old friends again. It's basically a reprise of the previous book, except the stowaway comes and tries to steal credit for all this. And they find Mr. Bass again, and they come home. And that's almost the entire plot of those 2 books. There's not too much more in it. And it's like very simply written, very clearly written, well-written prose writer, I think, Eleanor Cameron. And they were very enjoyable. They were marvelously wasteful. And I don't think I'll ever read them again, so I'm putting them in my eBay stacks. They're very hard to find, these books. I think you can find Wonderful Flight of the Mushroom Planet perhaps fairly cheap as a paperback, but particularly the later volumes, which I remember as a kid finding them more interesting, much like the later volumes of the Oz books. Those seem to be very pricey and very hard to get. So anyway, I'm going to sell those. And that's the entire report I have. Oh, the only other thing that was sort of interesting that came out of the Wikipedia article was that Eleanor Cameron became a critic. She wrote a couple of books of criticism I did not read, and maybe someday I will. And she was she didn't like Roald Dahl's kids' books. She really went after him, and she really thought Charlie the Chocolate Factory was like a horrible book, which is only funny to me because when I was a kid, I never got into Roald Dahl's kids' books. My brother liked them a lot, and I never read them. There was something too episodic about them, and I always liked to have a nice, strong central point of view, a character you sort of liked to be in the middle of it, and his characters were always kind of horrific in a way. But I never got into them enough to know. Anyway, she had some really strong words and was very critical of Roald Dahl's books and found them quite kind of unpleasant books for kids to read. And she got in some sort of, that was her most controversial period of her life. And I believe Ursula K. Le Guin came along and agreed with her and kind of supported her in this condemnation of Roald Dahl's children's books. So anyway, I never was a Roald Dahl children's book fan, though I do like his short stories. Okay, that's a totally wasted. There's a marvelously wasteful 10 minutes about a couple of marvelously wasteful books. And do I think kids today would like them? I think they would. I have no idea. They seem like very tame, pleasant, amiable books. And just as a child, my memories of those books, it just sparkles. And I got a little glimmers of those sparkles rereading it. Okay, take care. We'll be back soon. And Dodo says goodbye. Bye.